There's no doubt today was an historic event, the first King's speech in 70 years. Prince Charles, as he was then, did give the speech last year, but only in his mother's place. She was too poorly, obviously, to attend Parliament. So it was a big moment historically, but politically, it was a bit of a damp squib. I think the most contentious piece of legislation put forward is an advanced drilling of the North Sea for more oil and gas. That's going to upset Labour, that's going to upset environmentalists and green groups. And it's really one of the big dividing lines that Rishi Sunak's trying to put down. But that was beyond that. There's some criminal justice reform, but we knew about was coming already. Actually, what really was noticeable about this King's speech is the lack of big policies. And they're going to ban rickshaws in London and perhaps look at taxing vapes and outlawing smoking. But again, things we already knew. What there really wasn't today was any big surprises. And that really does say something about a government that's been in power for 13 years. It does start to look like it's slightly run out of steam. Tory MPs and ministers have described this as pretty thin gruel. I think the biggest reaction to the speech from the Tories' own side was a bit of a shrug of the shoulders. You can see what they're trying to do in the run up to the election. We expect to be sometime between spring and October next year, which is put some dividing lines down, make some issues that are a bit more awkward for Labour, try to get them on the side of, make it look like they're opposing things that will help the economy. But I don't think this is going to cut it. Rishi Sunak's got one big throw of the dice left, which is the autumn statement. And unless we see some really sort of big retail policies in that, things that Tory MPs can sell to voters, things that people are going to feel in their pockets, things that are going to address the cost of living, then I do really wonder how they're going to sort of make an election-winning platform out of this policy offering, because frankly, there's just not enough there. Obviously, the government write the speech for the king, and then he presents it on behalf of the government. It's in the words of his ministers, and I think it was really telling. Actually, right at the top of the speech, he made very clear that those headwinds from the situation in Ukraine haven't gone away. The COVID pandemic plus the war in Ukraine have made life tough for lots and lots of people through energy prices and inflation. And another touching moment I thought in the House earlier was actually Keir Starmer, Rishi Sunak both stood up and actually said, look, Ukraine may not still be on the front pages every day as it was a couple of years ago, but we must not forget those issues, nor must we forget the conflict in the Middle East. And actually, you can see Rishi Sunak actually trying to make a bit of a domestic point throughout today, mentioning lots of times anti-Semitism, tackling the scourge of that, and trying to make Starmer a little bit more uncomfortable, because obviously more than a third of his party, nearly half of his MPs now, are openly contradicting his position on the situation in Israel and calling for a unilateral ceasefire. And I think the domestic politics is starting to creep into that issue. Obviously, the horrific scenes we're seeing from the Middle East, nothing really should distract from that and can distract from that. But you can see it starting to become a bit of a political football now, which I think we're going to see more and more as the weeks go on. There's an increasing frustration in Downing Street that they're pulling lots of levers and nothing really does seem to be moving those poll digits. When it looked like they were starting to tighten, the mood in the Tory party was much more buoyant. Now it's back to basically where they've been all year, which is Labour with a 15 to 20 point lead. That sort of grimness has started to set back in on the government benches, the sort of acceptance that they're on their way to opposition. It's tough to, it's increasingly frustrating. You can see it etched on the faces of the front bench. Nothing they really seem to be trying is working. I'm not sure any of these issues are going to move the dial immediately. We've got the autumn statement, which is the next big set event on November 22nd. I think without some serious tax cuts or a big retail offer, it's hard to see what will move the dial. Now, some in government are saying, look, the voters are bored. They've had too much politics over the last couple of years. They just want some quiet time to get on with their lives. And as the election gets closer, they'll start to focus more on what is going on in Westminster. That is a very optimistic way of looking at it. The more cynical and downbeat people in government say, you know what, we've blown it. The voters have made up their mind, and we can throw the absolute kitchen sink at them. But once the government has lost credibility, it's incredibly hard to get it back. And so, in fact, whatever they do in the coming months, that poll deficit isn't going to change. I suspect it's probably somewhere in between the two of those things. There's still a vast amount of undecided voters who, yes, they may have voted Tory in 2019. They're not sure they're going to do that this time, but they're also not sure they're going to vote for Starmer. So, in one way, there's probably all to play for. But then I probably would say that because that would keep me in a job.